All right, guys. So we're just going to go through a little bit about sales operations and pipeline management. So obviously what happens is once the ads go live and through the other kind of various bits of marketing efforts, you're going to get the leads. Okay, so the leads, if they come from us, automatically will fill your pipeline. And if you're not sure what that is, then you've probably missed a couple of modules. And the pipeline is essentially where all your leads are kept. So the thing we want to go through today is how we kind of manage the pipeline and some other kind of bits and pieces around sales operations. Specifically, the agenda is the pipeline kind of follow-up protocol, pipeline management and sort of nurturing, sales team structure, and just some thoughts around commissions, and how to kind of track your sales efforts to better know how to improve and where you might be going wrong. So the first thing is the pipeline follow-up protocol. Now, remember the biggest thing to remember is that we are going for the most interested and the most ideal people, okay? And if that is the case, we believe that, obviously depending on your market and depending on the time of the year, you've really got 7 days to turn these leads around into a sale if we're talking about the most interested, the most ideal. If you find that you're trying to call someone for the 48th time and it's on the 16th, morning after they've sort of dropped into your pipeline, they're not responding to any of your phone calls, they're not replying to any of your messages, but I would probably put a line through that one and say, not yet. This is about being clever with your time and just about remembering who we're going for here, okay? The most interested and the most ideal as the sort of first priority, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a better gym, okay? And that's what that's about. I'd give it about 7 to 10 days, obviously going closer to the 7, depending on the time of the year and depending on, there's always going to be someone who was away or might have got, sick as soon as they put the lead through. There's always going to be certain circumstances, but generally speaking, for 70% of the time, I would suggest 7 days is how long you've got to turn around a lead into a sale. Now, the key to maximizing your pickup rates and maximizing your effectiveness to sort through the leads to get to the top of the pile as quickly as possible is your urgency. You've got to get to these leads within minutes of them coming through. Okay. Now, some of the studios that are going the best in terms of the sales side of things, they have a resource available and hungry, whether it's an internal one or whether it's using us and my sales team to do the sales for you. Either way, if you really want to maximize the amount of sales that you're making and reduce the amount of money you're wasting, and reduce how long it's going to take for you to get onto these people, and then reduce the amount of friction that you're causing to some of these leads because you keep calling them at the wrong times, I would have a resource available, okay, that is dedicated resource. And when I say dedicated, I don't necessarily mean they have to be doing it full time, but that is their job, right? Like that they are responsible for making the sales for your studio. It's not a favor; they're getting paid for it. And it's very clear what the expectations are, which I'll go through a bit in the next slide or the one after. So fresh leads within 5 minutes, have a resource available and hungry. And I would also suggest a third point is you've got to make sure that you're making these phone calls, okay? You've got to make sure that you're making these follow-up phone calls when they are most likely to pick up the phone, and when they're going to be most likely to be available, as opposed to when it's most convenient for you, when you're ready. Like if you're finding that you're just hitting voicemails 8 hours of the day, you're not getting onto anyone, and you're not having much fun, you're probably calling people at the wrong times, okay? And that's kind of relates to not being urgent enough at the start when the lead dropped in, and secondly, trying to call people at a time that might be convenient for you because you've had your lunch and you've got you're comfortable and you've done your little errands or whatever it is. Now it's time to call people, but it's it's after hours now. It's like 8 o'clock. It might be too late, or it might be It might be 2 o'clock in the afternoon and people have had their lunch and then they've gone back into work mode. Whatever it might be for your particular market. Okay. Then in terms of the actual follow-up protocol, as soon as a lead comes in, what my guys do, which seems to work at the moment, and why I say at the moment is because it does change. But what seems to work at the moment, as soon as the lead comes in, is they make that call within the first 5 minutes, where possible. They make the call within the first 5 minutes, and if they don't go through, we will do what we call a double tap. So we'll try and call that person. Let's say we're trying to call Rob. Rob didn't pick up the phone. Without even leaving a voicemail, we'll just call Rob back straight away. So we'll just do the double tap, like a double call. That normally works pretty well. If that then didn't work, every attempt will be a call, a voicemail, and a text. Okay, so it's a call. You make the call, you leave the voicemail. Hey Rob, it's Andrew from F45 St. Clair Village. Just giving you a quick buzz, mate, as it looks like you're interested in doing our 28-day Kickstart program or the 30-day reboot or whatever you want to call your thing. I'll try you again a little bit later on, or feel free to shoot me a text. And then you'll follow up with a text message as well saying, hey Rob, looks like you're interested in the program. There's only 8 spots left, so I just want to make sure that we have a chance to have a chat before the spots run out. And then you can also use email as well. Now, we would do sort of 3 attempts a day for the first 5 days or so, okay? Depending on what level of, response you're getting back from this person. It might stretch out to 7 days. It might end after the second day with them saying, no, sorry, I thought you were a lot closer than, where you are, or something like that. Now, some people prefer different methods. I know there's a spot here in Sydney that is just notorious for not being great over the phone. So we're now having to resort to emails and text messages. There's also another spot in Sydney who has a lot of ethnic people in the community, and they're quite self-conscious about getting on their phone because they don't really speak a lot of English. So again, the same thing there. We spend a bit more time on the phones. On the messages and on the emails. You've got to use. You just need to sort of adapt to what's happening in your sort of local market. Try different times and different numbers. So when we do the 3 attempts, like for instance, if on day 1 we tried at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 5 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, well, the next day we might try a little bit later. It might be 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. We'll just try different times. Sometimes people just it might not be that they're avoiding you. These people are busy, which is why kind of 45-minute workouts in and out is something they're interested in. Scarcity and urgency, as I mentioned earlier, just sort of using a little bit of that through your messages to kind of get them to take the bait and to buy it. You don't want sort of fake urgency or fake sale ends tomorrow. It's like it's not, because the ads are going to be going for weeks. Again, towards the end of that sort of 7 to 10 days, once you've tried them, once you've done the 3 attempts a day for the first, 5 days or so, again, just kind of being a bit loose on that depending on how they're responding. Just before you finally close off that lead, just send them a final message of, hey Rob, listen, we've just been trying to get a hold of you for a few days now for the 28-day Kickstart that you inquired in. Not sure if you're still interested. Please reply with a Y for a yes, or a no, or an N for a no, just so I know what to do next. And if they write back as an N, mate, at least you know where that lead is, and it's the second best answer. Okay, because then at least you can, you just mark them as red, so you can move on and not spend any more time on that guy just yet. But we'll come back to that later. Or if they write back a Y or a yes, if they write back as a Y or a yes, what we would do is we would try and book them in for a time. Great. Okay, so when's a good time to chat? Can I call you tomorrow morning at 9 or at 10 o'clock? Give them 2 alternate times so they do actually choose one, rather than saying when's the best time, because then it's like, oh, fuck, where do I start? And so the note there is that it will depend, and it often moves. We might find that we get no one picking up at 3 o'clock, which is when we have our internal sales meeting with all the sales guys that do the calls for all the other studios. Because we choose that time because that's generally kind of a dead time in the afternoon. However, we did a live training the other day in in our internal sales meeting at that 3 o'clock time, and every person we called picked up. So it's just one of those things where have some like priority times, but don't make any kind of global statement saying that no one's going to pick up at this time or everyone's going to pick up at this time. It's never that case. So secondly is pipeline management. So what happens is you get this, your pipeline eventually will just be a sea of data. Where do you start? Where do you know where to spend your time? All that sort of stuff. Make it really easy with using a few kind of simple principles. The first thing is every lead. Get in the habit of using your pipeline as your single source or your single hub of all the leads. So I'm talking about anyone that comes in on a DM in the Instagram, Facebook message, text message, email, like all the inbound stuff, walk-ins, referrals, everything. You will reduce the amount of leads and therefore revenue, income, profit that falls through the cracks or just disappears. You will greatly reduce that by making sure that you capture it in this pipeline and make sure that every single person is accounted for. Okay, and you can mark them as from different sources. So later on, we can do some analysis on shit. Like you're actually getting 30% referrals. That's awesome. Like what else can we do there to make that 40%? Because they're free and they're the best ones. Or you might be doing like a lot of local activations and you'll be getting a lot of people, or you might be on a high street and you get a lot of people sort of walking in. Like if that's working, if you're getting 50% of all your leads as walk-ins, shit, we need to spend a little bit more time in training up your studio team to be able to convert 80% of walk-ins, which I can help you guys with. Because they're free and they've come to you. Now, to manage the sea of data in your pipeline, just use a very simple color coding scheme. If you don't like these, choose your own, whatever, just do something. Okay, so red is what we use as a not yet. Now, we never say no, unless it's someone who's, I don't know, who's probably told you to F off. It's probably a no. But aside from that, it's probably just a not yet. And, we'll be doing more stuff later on down the track in terms of how we can kind of subscribe all these leads into an ongoing lead nurturing funnel using your kind of active campaign or your MailChimp email clients. But we'll put that as a not yet. Now, anyone that seems keen or they're like, yeah, I'm actually really interested, but I'm about to go away for work, and I've really got to go now. But if you give me a call on Monday, we can chat through it further. Someone like that is an orange, is a warm. Okay, they need a little bit of follow up. They're pretty keen, or they said, I'll get you my credit card details, or they think they've got they want to check with their friend first, or something like that. They're probably a warm that we mark as orange. Now, the reason why we mark that as an orange is because, like, shit, if you've only got 1 hour and it's Friday afternoon and you need to make 3 sales to hit your sales target and you've got a whole pipeline to call, where do you start? You start with the orange, okay? Then the green is a sold. That's the best one. Now, you can either process it on the spot, or if you have a back-end team, like we do, we just mark it as green, and then every evening our back-end team just runs through the pipeline and just processes everyone that got sold that day just in one batch, which is, for us, is more time efficient than doing it, all throughout the day. And then once they have been processed in Mindbody by our back-end team, they just get marked as a blue, which is processed, etc. You might have a different, you might have a pink one, which might be like, might have a referral, or you might have a pink one that might be like a local corporate, lead, which means that that person might have, that might be an opportunity for a bulk membership for 10 people in their office. I want you to use it however you see fits for you, but this is what's been working for us since we started doing this stuff a couple of years ago, and it completely changed everything for us. The amount of leads and sales we were losing because stuff was getting missed between friggin' text messages and inboxes and all the other kind of crap, and like everything went into here. If I sat on a bus and someone showed some interest, I'd grab their details and put it into the pipeline, like everything. Now, every day, just get in the habit of jumping on here and just keep massaging the pipeline to move the ball further down the field with all the leads, right? Who needs a follow-up? Who needs a message? Who do you need to send some information to about the challenge or whatever it is? The key to making sales is keeping organised. You've got to stay organised. Keep on top of your appointments. Put them in your calendar. If someone goes, call back on Monday, don't just scribble it on a piece of paper and not do anything with it. Literally put it in your diary. Call this person back. Call John Smith back on that day. Hey, John. Yeah, Rob from F45 saying, Claire, you wanted me to give you a call back on Monday. How was your work trip? That sort of stuff. Those follow-ups. Some of these leads might take 5 follow-ups. But that's what it'll take, who you've asked for referrals and who you haven't asked for referrals, and definitely use the notes sections to sort of put some color around their why, why is it do they need to get sort of back training in? Because there's really good intel for your inductions and for the rest of your trainers and your staff to sort of, what was the point of having these guys tell you their deep, dark secrets if you weren't going to friggin' share that with your team? And so your team can't even build those relationships with them around that intel. Okay, so pipeline management. I can talk for hours on this, right? So what I might do in one of the sort of Zoom calls next week or the week after is I might get one of my top sales guys on to the Zoom call to explain. And we're just going to have to figure out a way to do it whilst keeping kind of some of the data sensitive, but explain literally what his day looks like. Because I find it quite fascinating. Sales team structure and commission. Now, this will vary wildly depending on your local, for the guys in the US and Canada, minimum wages and what you different employment laws and things like that. But depending on how fast you want to grow, I firmly believe that you need to have a resource dedicated to making the sales and incentivized well. Now, when I say dedicated, again, I don't necessarily mean full-time because our very first resources weren't full-time on it. They were a trainer who did some extra stuff for us. But everyone knew that Pip was making the sales. If we got a lead, Pip was going to make the sales. It wasn't shared between 3 people. If someone got to it, if someone didn't get to it, if it's kind of like a favor or no, it's not. It's got to be a resource that is committed to doing the sales and is paid well for it. Now, at the start, I really do believe it's you. Unless you're absolutely stretched and you're not even in the business that much, or you've got a full-time manager that you can kind of give this to at the start, which I can help you train. But for 70% of the time, if you're the owner and you are kind of in and around the business, I did the first 100 sales myself before I passed it on to anyone else because I really wanted to understand it. And it was the best thing I ever did. Because then if you passed it on to your team and you'd already made the first 100 sales, you knew, and then if you're operating at 50% conversion rate and you put that as an expectation onto your team member, they knew that you could do that and you knew that, and they know that it's possible because you were doing it. I just think it's so important, unless you're not even in the business at the moment, absolutely strapped for time and you've got someone else there to do it or we're doing it for you. Now, the pros and cons about having a trainer. So the pros are, obviously, they know the product. They love the product, okay? They can talk about it from a perspective of, health and fitness and what you've got to do to lose the weight and all that sort of stuff. The cons are, and this is probably pretty big cons, is that everyone seems to want to, I just made that sin. Not everyone, but a lot of people do seem to want a call back after work, okay? And guess what? After work is exactly when the sessions are on. So you're always going to have this clash of timetables, okay? That's something to manage. A different staff member, as in if you've hired your own salesperson, the pros there is perfect. That's exactly what your job is. Right? So you've got a dedicated resource and, it's the availability thing. Now, the cons are, you now have another staff member that you've got to manage, nurture, motivate, just the HR side of things, which, as we all know, is can be a massive headache in the business. And you've just got another staff member. Now, training a sales staff member, motivating a sales staff member, remunerating a sales staff member is very different to a trainer. Okay, if you've never done it before, or if you have done it before, like, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's very different than a trainer. Now, in terms of commission, obviously the simplest way is, for instance, if you had a trainer that was just, let's say with my first person that I passed the sales on to was Pip. So Pip would do her morning sessions. Pip would do her morning sessions. The 6:45, 7:30, and then she would grab the phone, open up the pipeline, and then make a bunch of sales. Now I think we were paying Pip at the time. We were doing these kickstarts that were $132, $138 to start with, and we were giving Pip half of everything that she sold, right? So half of that 138, I think it was. And it was good money for her. Like, she was eventually doing 20 sales a week. And I took her from doing 0 sales, never had any sales experience, to doing 20 sales a week. And she was earning more money doing the sales than she was doing her training. And she was training Monday to Friday. It was enough to move from a shitty little unit that she had in Sydney Olympic Park to living 5 minutes off the water in Balmain here in Sydney, which is a nice area for those who know Balmain. And she was an absolute pitbull. Okay? So that's probably the simplest way to do it. Or you could do it as a percentage, like, you get 30% of anything you sell. So it's like 30% of $199, or if that's still like a membership, you might be able to, what's the minimum value of that membership, and they get a third of that, or something like that. Now, obviously, the more complex you get, the more it's like, way beyond this particular module here, but it's a salary, whatever that needs to be in your country or your state. Plus a tiered commission structures and things like that. Now that gets quite complex, and happy to have a one-on-one chat with any one of you guys about that and share what we've done and what works and what doesn't work. But anyone that's worked in a sales organization before, that it does move, it does change. You've got to keep things interesting for these guys, because that's what they're like. And if you know the code around that, then you can kind of unlock that for these guys. Oh, and then the other kind of point about, are they remote? Are they in studio? What other responsibilities does this person have? Like, are these people also responsible kind of in a way to kind of roll those people over as well in about 3 weeks' time? Or do they have any other kind of commitments or responsibilities in the studio? Like, are they the head trainer? Are they your membership manager? Are they also retention? There's lots of different sort of facets there. I'll tell you what I did. Me, stage 1, it was me. First 100 sales, I did. Then I moved it on to Pip, who was a trainer that did some extra hours throughout the day and throughout the weeks. And I'll train her up on doing sales, and I paid her a commission per sale. That's what I did for months. Like, we doubled our gym pretty much just by Pip doing that, right? Like that. And then it moved to another commission-only sales guy. And he wanted commission-only because for him it was like, that really drove him. Now, but then the next person that we had didn't want to go commission only because, it's pretty expensive living here in Sydney, so they wanted some security. And now what we've sort of rested on for our internal sales guys is a salary plus a tiered commission structure. But again, we've had this for the last kind of 4 months or so, and we might evolve that again, depending on. But it's working for us now. For a lot of you guys who are sort of maybe new to this, or you haven't hired someone yet, I would start with you doing it first, and then find perhaps maybe a trainer that could do it with a bit of commission on the side. If you've got a full-time manager hanging around not doing a whole lot, I can coach them on how to do the sales as well. Either way, the 3 most important factors are constant training and motivating, right? If you've got an internal person, you've got to be constantly training them, like constant, like I'm talking about every day. Not a day went by when we didn't do some training and motivating. Communication has got to flow to your team about the sales that they're making, right? The number of sales, like celebrate that, or like the types of people that they're selling, the intel from the phone calls. It's got to flow through to the team. But they've also got to be committed to being responsible and committed to the responsibility of making the sales. It's not when they feel like it, or it's not a favor, like we're paying you to do. This is the role that you've got. Once you've got those things, your sales conversion rate, and therefore your growth rate will significantly increase. Now, last bit is tracking your sales efforts. Now, why this is so important to do every friggin' day is that we know where you're strong, where you're leaking, where we need to improve, tweak, optimize, trends, the whole thing. Okay. Now, don't do things the hard way. Okay. This should never feel hard, which is different to effort. Okay. Obviously, you've got to put a lot of effort into it, but if things start feeling hard, you're probably doing things the hard way. You know, if it feels hard because you're hitting voicemails all day long, you're probably calling at the wrong times, or you probably didn't call them when the leads dropped in, you know, urgent enough to start with, and things like that. These are the numbers that we track every single day across my entire sales team. We use a table such as below in a Google sheet, and then what we do is we transfer any of the sales that we made that day onto that scoreboard that I've told you guys all about, which you then use to track your weekly dashboards. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, you've missed a couple of modules, go back to the training or reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. Number of calls, number of pickups, number of conversations, the number of sold, the percentage of sold over conversations is your win rate, and then how many referrals you got, okay? So what this tells me here is, for instance, on this day here, on 28th, you know, Jack made 50 calls, 10 people picked up, you managed to have 8 conversations, so that means 2 people would have gone, oh yeah, mate, ring back tomorrow. Or, sorry, can't talk now. Whatever. A conversation is whether you're able to go through the script. You're able to have a conversation about the script. Sold is easy. Your percentage win rate, so that's just sold over conversions, and then how many people you ask for referrals. Now, you can see here, right, what I'm more interested in here, and feel free to send me all your sales data for me to kind of help you interpret it. But what I can see here is, you know, it's more about, there's no point fudging any of these numbers because it's actually more about the relationship between them that is more important than the actual number itself. But, you know, on this day we made 50 calls, 10 people, you spoke to 8, okay? You made 2 sales and you're at 25%. You wouldn't have, you might have got one. What that suggests to me here is you still had 8 conversations. That's still kind of plenty. What we need to do here is we need to fix what you're saying on the phone. You're probably not following the script. That's what that kind of says to me here. You're probably not following the script. Whereas this version here, 20 calls, 15 picked up. It was a good day on the pickups. You had 10 chats out of the 20. That's good. So you made less phone calls, but you made 4 times as many sales because you might have called at the right time. Yeah? So that's a much... Do you know what I mean? Look at that. You had 4 times the result. You had 4 times the result because you're probably calling at the right times, or you called, you know, within the 5 minutes, and because you've been doing all your training, you've nailed the script. So you got 8 out of 10 people that you spoke to, and you got 4 referrals. That's a great day. But it would have only taken you, you know, this would have been hitting voicemails all day long. This would have been, you made 20 calls, 15 picked up, 10 you actually had a chat to, of which 8 sold. That's a great day. That's an absolute, that tells me that you've been following the script, you know what you're doing, you've been doing all the training, and you're really getting into it. Over here, again, 50 sales, tough day on the phones, not many picking up, you only had 2 conversations, but you're at 100%. So that shows me, so you're 2 from 2, which might look great. I'm 100%. That sounds awesome. But only 2 picked up, or 4 picked up, but you only had 2 conversations. So you're good with the script. Now we just need to kind of optimize this bit here, you know, the pickup rate. So that's where the difference, but if you just looked at the number of sold, it was that's the same day as that, right? But they're actually kind of very different. And that's the day you want. This isn't about being a call center, making 1,000 calls a day and not getting onto people, because then we've got to optimize when you're calling these people, how old are these leads that you're trying to call, you know, did you not do enough at the start to kind of try and get onto them within the first 5 minutes? What are you sending them to get their pickup rates? Like, there's different things that, I want you to bring to the sales masterclasses and show me your data and go, look, this is what's going on. What can I do better? So that's kind of that for now. A lot we kind of went through there, but the more we kind of peel back and go deeper into this, I'm more than happy to do either one-on-one on one of your Zoom calls, or come to the sales Zoom masterclasses with some specific stuff. Show me your data, show me your share what is happening on your side, and we can kind of help you bust through it. All right, guys.